So earlier, we talked a little bit about our brain and how our mind works. We talked about the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and then we talked about the prefrontal cortex. One of the things that our mind likes to do, our brain likes to be efficient. Interesting thing about our efficiencies is that oftentimes our minds will create mental shortcuts for us. And that these mental shortcuts start to develop into our habits, into our attitudes, into our belief systems, and ultimately impact our behavior. But sometimes those mental shortcuts are based on faulty information or a lack of information. Therefore, if we follow the rest of that logic, then we actually could be behaving in ways that are detrimental to us because we started off with bad or biased information. Remember, bias is leaning towards one way or another against something that is opposing. So when we start to think about how stereotypes get formed, oftentimes it is these implicit bias. And then when we add race into that, we start to recognize that we see the world as we are, but not as it is. When we talk about these particular concepts, I want us to be mindful that as we're operating in the world, it's important for us to recognize that our reptilian brain is giving us information, that our mammalian brain is telling us how we feel about that information, but ultimately it's our prefrontal cortex that allows us to make really good decisions being mindful. Otherwise, we take these shortcuts as if they are truth. One example of that is this idea of a stereotype. When we talk about stereotypes, what are they? How do they get formed? A stereotype is a disconnected artifact. And what do you mean by a disconnected artifact? Well, artifacts are directly related to values, and those two things have a symbiotic relationship. Very much like the stem of a carrot and the root of the carrot. The root feeds the stem, and the stem feeds the root. So they have a symbiotic relationship. And when both of them are doing their jobs, you have a healthy vegetable. But when they're disconnected, both of them are looking at the same fate. They're both going to die. And so when the stem is separated from the root, when it's separated from the values, that green stem becomes the artifact of that culture. And when we disconnect the artifact from the values, we get stereotypes. And so, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I certainly have, seen or heard someone talk about his stereotype and ask myself, well, isn't it true about that group of people? That aren't they drunks or don't they steal? Is it true that they can't jump? I've had all of those. In fact, there is a little bit of truth there, but what I've done is I've disconnected the artifact from its value. A hijab is a very good fashion statement, but it's much more than a fashion statement. It's a statement of faith. It's a statement of worldview, if you will. I was born on October 30th, and as a kid, I loved my birthday because it was right before Halloween. It was trick or treat. And I had the 3 C's. I had cake, I had candy, and I had costumes. What more could a kid want? As an adult, I hate Halloween. And I hate it because this is the time when people feel the most compelled to be as bigoted and racist and prejudiced as they ever want to be under the guise of having fun. And so I'm in the bank, I'm standing in line, and there's a gentleman who walks in behind me, and he's standing there. And he's obviously trying to get my attention, kind of peering around me, making gestures and noises so that he can get my attention. And so I bite the bait. And I said, "Hey, how are you?" And he says, I'm fine. And he's priming himself, and he's impressed with his outfit. And I said, Halloween costume? And he says, yes. He's wearing a big purple hat with leopard on the brim and this neon suit. It was just crazy. So I asked him, well, what's your costume? And he looks at me dismayed and a little bit angry. And he says, I'm a pimp. Now, I look at him and I'm really baffled by this, because it's very clear to me that he's never met a pimp, because they don't dress like that. The pimps in my neighborhood would have never worn. Anyway, the second thing that was very concerning to me is, how would this person want to emulate a person, another individual, that is destroying human life? Oh, I get it. He's operating from a stereotype, something that he saw on television or he heard on one of those car shows where they're trying to dress up their car, called Pimp My Ride. Okay, so he's operating from these stereotypes. And because he's operating from those stereotypes, he's engaging the world in an artificial way, because there are real people that don't act like that. And so our stereotypes are based in reality, but have been disconnected from the values associated with what we see. And so it becomes important to recognize that stereotypes add to this idea of implicit bias. And so how do you dismantle a stereotype? Get to understand where the stereotype came from, and the folks who are creating that so-called stereotype might actually have a good reason for it. So negative stereotypes are in fact forms of implicit bias. This is something that I do in one of my sessions, and I want you to just play along with me. What are some negative stereotypes? Write those down or think about those things. Take both of your hands and gently grab your family tree. Shake your family tree. Shake it until any of those negative stereotypes that you either thought of or you wrote down fall out of your family tree. So whatever you can say about another group, I would imagine that you can say about your own group. And I would go as far as to even suggest that you might even be able to find it in your own family. As human beings, we are much more alike than we're different. And so racial implicit bias becomes problematic because it accentuates these appearances of difference, when in fact, any appearance of difference is actually an optical illusion. Wait a minute. Optical illusion? Don't you mean optical illusion? No, I mean obstacle illusion. Artificial barriers to authentic human relations.